Good morning students, and welcome back to my video, which is the third one of a series of videos on the portrait of a lady, the first chapter of the textbook Hornbill. I think all of you have gone through the first and the second video and answered the questions at the end, given at the end of these videos. I say this because unless and until you go through those videos and do the exercises, it will not be fruitful to you to understand the concept and understand the chapter, so to say. So before we go to the third video, let us recap what we have understood. In the first video, we learnt about biography, the different kinds, and in the second video, we discussed some aspects of the life of the grandmother of Khuswant Singh. Here we discussed about the grandfather. We came to know specifically three aspects of grandmother. In this video, I am going to describe about the city life of the grandmother and Khuswant Singh when they went to live in the city with the parents of Khuswant Singh. Here we will come to know what happened in the city, what incidents took place in the city that affected their relationships before the author went abroad for higher studies. And then we will also come to know about what happened after Khuswant Singh returned from higher studies from abroad and how grandmother died. This video gives an explanation of the life story of the grandmother. It's a very emotional part. So be attentive, focused. So let's go to the video. A time came in the life of Khuswant Singh and his grandmother when they had to leave their village. The parent of Khuswant Singh had called them up to the city because they were settled now. So they left the village and went to live along with the parent of Khuswant Singh in the city. In the city, child Khuswant Singh was admitted to an English school. A motor bus from school would regularly come to pick him up from home and take him to school. And after the school was over, the same motor bus would take him back to home. The daily routine of the grandmother of taking him to school and bringing him back to home was broken. Yes, there was a meeting ground. There was a common ground where they could meet and talk because they were given a common room to live. So whenever Khuswant Singh returned back from school, they had ample time to talk to each other during evening and probably during nights. During this time, the grandmother would ask about the school, about the subjects that were taught over there. Once, the author Khuswant Singh told him that they taught English and alphabets and Western sciences, laws of gravity, Archimedes' principle, etc. This was not to the liking of the grandmother. Probably it was not that she did not like these subjects. Probably it was because she was not able to help Khuswant Singh in his homework that she was quite unhappy. Later on, she came to know that there were no teachings of gods and scriptures in the English school in which Khuswant Singh was studying. This was absolutely not to the liking of the grandmother. She became quite more unhappy. She thought that the inculcation of moral and ethical values could only be possible through the studies of gods and scriptures. If no study of gods and scripture is given to a child, such a child would become deficient in moral and ethical values. Whether she was right or wrong is a matter of discourse. But nevertheless, since there was no teachings of gods and scriptures, this was not to her liking at all. Further, at another time, when Khushwant Singh told him that they taught him music also, this was quite a bolt from the blue for the grandmother. For music, she had entertained a different ideology. What was that? According to her, music was not a subject of gentle folk. It was meant for lowly people like harlots, whores, and prostitutes, etc. What did she do then? Did she revolt? She could have revolted, but she did not had any altercation either with Khushwant Singh or with the parents of Khushwant Singh. She just stopped talking to them. This activity, that is not to talk to the parents of Khushwant Singh and or about with Khushwant Singh about his education and studies, was a kind of revolt as per Khushwant Singh. Yeah, years rolled by and a time came when a separate room was given to Khushwant Singh. The only common meeting ground between them was broken. Now she was all alone and she had to pass her time by herself. This was not to the liking of the grandmother at all. Probably Khushwant Singh also did not like it. But what could be done? Then how did the grandmother pass her day? She used to sit before the spinning wheel right in the morning and kept on sitting throughout the day. While sitting there, she would keep on murmuring the prayers of God and simultaneously counting the beads on the garland of rosary. Only during midday, for some half an hour, she would get up from there and go to the veranda. Since there was no street or seer to feed, she had taken to feeding the pigeons that would come and sit in hundreds of numbers in the veranda, where she would go there and keep feeding the crumbs of bread to these sparrows. Actually, these sparrows had become quite intimate with the grandmother. They used to chop in an awkward way, in a haphazard way, so that there was a complete cacophony of choppings for this half an hour. And they had become so close to the grandmother that some of them would dare to sit on her shoulders and some even on her head. But the grandmother was never angry. She never shooed them away. She just said words of rebuke in a very mild way, light words in a very mild way. For this half an hour, she would keep on feeding these sparrows and sing prayers to God. After that, she would again go back to the spinning wheel where she would sit and pass her the remaining part of her day. A time came when the author had completed his university education, so he decided to go abroad for higher education. The author thought that when the grandmother would come to know about this decision, she would become emotional, she would burst into tears. But contrary to the expectation of Khushwant Singh, she was practical enough not to be emotional. Rather, she was internally quite happy that somehow he is going outside to get some higher studies. She even went to the station, that is railway station, to see him off. But consistently, she kept on telling beads of rosary which she had in one of her hands, and murmuring prayers also. Just before the train was to depart, she went near the author Khushwant Singh and kissed his forehead. The author became awestruck. This, he thought, was probably her last physical contact with the grandmother. Who knows, she would be alive for the next 5 years for which he is going outside. Who knows whether he would be able to see her again when he returns from abroad. It is said that time and tide wait for none. Yes, time passes smoothly. 5 years was a long period for a grandmother like the grandmother of Khushwant Singh. But years rolled by, years rolled on, and a day came when author Khushwant Singh returned back from abroad. That day was really a matter of joy and elation for the grandmother. And how did she express her elation? She gathered all the women folk, that is specifically old women folk from her neighborhood, and started singing with them the songs of homecoming of warriors on a dilapidated drum. She kept on thumping her hands on a dilapidated or the sagging skins of the old dilapidated, almost worn out drum. What is the song of homecoming of warrior? In classical periods, when warriors used to return after the battlefield alive, it was a matter of rejoice for the family members. They considered his valor to be rejoiced, and therefore they used to sing songs of homecoming of warriors. For the grandmother also, returning of Khushwant Singh from abroad was no less than returning of a warrior from the battlefield. So she kept on singing homecoming of warriors song, and she kept on singing and singing and singing throughout evening, incessantly. And she strained herself a lot. She did not stop. For the first time in her life, she had stopped praying. This alarmed the family members of Khushwant Singh. They had to force her to stop singing. The next day, the grandmother fell ill. Doctor was called in. The doctor examined her, gave her medicine, and assured the family members that there was nothing to worry. The fever was only due to excess straining that she gave her body the last evening. In a few hours she would be okay. But the grandmother thought otherwise. She thought that she had stopped praying for the first time in her life. Therefore God had punished her. And it was probably the last page of her life. She was not going to live long. She was going to die. And that's why she wanted to pass the remaining portion, the small remaining part of her life, silently and alone, singing prayer to God. She asked every member to leave her alone. Then she kept on singing prayers to God while counting beads on the rosary garland, and kept herself lying on the cot. After some time, her hands fell, and the rosary bead, that is the garland of the rosary bead, also fell on the ground. They showed that the grandmother was no more. Yes, she died. Her body was taken out into the veranda. After initial mourning, everybody went to prepare for the funeral. In the meantime, thousands of sparrows, thousands of pigeons had gathered in the veranda, but they were completely silent. There was no chirping at all. The mother of Khushwant Singh felt pity on them, and she brought some chapatis from the kitchen and changed them into crumbs of bread as the grandmother used to do, and threw them at them. But surprisingly, none of the pigeons took notice of this. None of them took even a morsel of the bread into their mouths. They just kept sitting over there. And when the body of the grandmother was taken away for funeral, they just silently flew away into the sky, into the oblivion. The next day, the crumbs of bread were broomed away. So students, this is the whole story about the grandmother of Khuswant Singh. Do you like this story? Was this portrait a real one, or rather it appeared real to you? How did you feel? Do you feel that the story had a sad ending? Do you feel that the ending should have been a better? But the ending cannot be anything else than the reality, because it was a real biography of a real grandmother of Khuswant Singh. Yes, my dear students, this is the story of the biography of the grandmother of Khuswant Singh. Now it's time for you to answer questions that would test your understanding of this story. Students, it's time now to check your knowledge and understanding of the text. On the screen you see there are some questions. These questions are from the textbook itself. You have to answer these questions and then post it at the prescribed site, where I'll check it and will discuss the mistakes that you probably might have committed, or something that you have lost to make note of.